This is video 2 of the C10 build series. Video 2 to 3 correction. This is video 3 of the C10 build series. Finally get our hands dirty and start taking the truck apart, and the build takes an unexpected turn on day 1. It's not good. Today is the day. We are finally getting our hands dirty. It's enough talking. We are gonna turn some bolts today and get some stuff done. So the first thing we're starting with today is we're gonna pull the bed off. And typically I wouldn't start there. Usually the first thing I start with is aligning all the body panels and sheet metal. And the reason why I start with the sheet metal and body panel alignment is it makes the reassembly that much easier, and that makes fitting up parts when I'm doing panel replacements that much faster and easier. If everything's set before the entire truck comes apart, I can drill and pin the hinges and mounting surfaces, so that way I can just put the bolts in, put the pins in, get everything lined up, and I can fit my sheet metal for the new parts and panels or for paint. Let's get to it. Let's grab that bed. Before the bed can come off, I need to go ahead and take the rear bumper off first, remove the tail lights to make sure all the taillight wiring is out of there and doesn't hang us up from taking the bed off. And you can already see it, I removed a marker light. I'm gonna take those off. I'm gonna pull the tailgate to shave some weight, and then that way I can get my engine hoist in there even closer to make it easier to pull that off. So enough yapping, I'm gonna get to it. To keep track of the hardware, I showed you a little trick in video 2, the last video. You should go watch that if you haven't, because there's some tasty little goodies in there. But if you know the trick, we're gonna be throwing our hardware in this little compartment just to keep it nice and organized.
Fortunately for me, this entire truck was disassembled and repainted about 20 years ago, and since then hasn't had many miles put on it. So all the hardware for the bumper, the tailgate, and the bed were pretty easy to take out and relatively uneventful.
I've got one bed bolt that's fighting me quite a bit. Actually, it's the first bed bolt to fight me. I'm sure there'll be more. But typically what I would do on a truck like this where they have a carriage bolt that runs down through the bed and it's an older truck, I would just grind around the bolt in the bed floor and just put a few tacks around that bolt. That way I can spin the nut off without the carriage bolt spinning. But right now, someone at some point put a ton of really cheap truck bed liner in here, and that's super thick and hard to get off, and the bed's full of pine needles, and I don't feel like vacuuming it out to prevent a fire. And I don't want to be that guy that burns his shop down on the internet. So we're going to try a cheater trick here. I linked a couple of vice grips together, so that way this one would wedge against the bed when I spin the knot off the backside. So we'll see how this goes. Once again, a little bit of laziness pays off, and my cheater vice grip trick worked. I got the nut off the backside. Oh, I love it when I don't have to break out more tools. All right, let's get back at it. I'm gonna spin the nuts off the rest of them, and we'll get this bed off of here. All right, here comes a very satisfying moment. The bed's actually coming off of the truck. See if we can get you over here a little better. All right, the bed's almost off, as you can see in the background there. One thing you definitely want to be careful with, especially if you're a one-man show like me, is the first time that bed comes up and loses loses contact with the frame, you want to make sure you're ready to pull the bed backward away from the cab. Now, I've had a few embarrassing moments in a body shop where putting beds on and off, I accidentally bumped the freshly painted bed in the back of a cab, and then we ended up painting the back of the cab and the bed. So be very careful so you don't end up with any brand new dents in your truck. I'm going to keep jacking on this thing, and I should probably pick a different word. I'm going to keep lifting on this thing, and we'll get the bed smoothly off of here. Man, we gotta take a breather and take a look at this. It is so satisfying. Man, I hope you can hear that rain. Sounds like someone hammering on the roof right now. It is so satisfying when you get a big piece of your project apart. Take a good look at this. Oh man, look at that. All right, let's check out our little DIY bed cart and how it does. Ooh, look at this in there. When I was building this, I want to make it more elevated than it was on the truck. That way it gets me up off the ground a little more when I'm working on it, especially working on the lower parts of the bed here. It's nice to be up off the ground where I'm not sanding with a DA over top of my head and getting dust in my eye. Now that I have the bed off, you can see I'm in pretty tight quarters here in this shop. There's the truck bed, there's the truck, and that's basically all the room I have. So you can see how nice it is to have a bed cart like that, where you can move the bed around. I have a big stash of parts over on the table. Make sure we salute Old Glory. And I'm gonna be putting it in the bed of the truck so it clears off my bench. I have a place to store parts when I'm not welding and working on the bed, which is pretty nice to have my big bench back. Again, super simple shop project. I love these little shop tools because they're so handy, underutilized, and under talked about in my. All right, in this video we got one other little tedious project I want to do. I want to fit all the body panels in sheet metal now before I start taking stuff off. This is the easiest time to align your body panels. Now, if you don't come from a body shop or a restoration shop world, you might just rip into this thing, take all the doors and hood off. In that case, you end up refitting the sheet metal and the body panels many times over, where if you just set the panel gaps from the beginning, they're not going to be perfect, but you're going to be darn close. That way you're not fitting and refitting body panels all the time. So I'm going to stop yammering and I'm going to get right to it. Okay, we've brought the party to the front of the vehicle. So we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to look over the body panels on this truck, and I'm going to teach you a thing or two about sheet metal alignment. Now, the body panels right off the bat are pretty close on this truck. Whoever painted it the last time did an okay job roughing out the alignment. There's just a few issues. You can see, maybe you can see. Try to get an angle on here where you can see this hood right here. It's about a thumb thickness back. Maybe you can see. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you can see the hood sitting back there, and there's a much wider gap on this side of the hood than there is over here. There we go. It's almost touching right there. So we got to adjust the hood gap. And you can see, maybe you can't see, this is kind of moldy and dark right there. Yeah, this body line sits up probably a 1/4 inch from where it should be, and the door gap's a little wide on top, and it goes tighter on the bottom. And it's generally tight here at the top where the cowl panel meets and the fender meets. And where else are we going over here? And on this side, it's got a decent gap. It's got a decent gap along the back side of the door, but on the front side of the door, it goes kind of wide, tight, wide. So what does this all mean? In a collision or a body shop or even a restoration shop, there's this saying, the sheet metal tells the story. And what that means, when we'd have a wrecked car come in, you could virtually tell what's going on underneath all the sheet metal just by the way it looked on the outside. And one of the main reasons why it's important to make sure your sheet metal fits is because you could have underlying problems like the frame might be bent. I had a project car back when I was in a trade school where we fought the sheet metal. We even hogged out the holes, which I'm embarrassed to even admit that we did that. We hugged out the bolt holes, and we fought that body of that car forever. And then finally we measured the frame and realized the frame was tweaked just ever so slightly, and we had to put on a frame rack. So it's kind of scarred me looking forward into the future that make sure your sheet metal looks good before it comes apart. Again, we talked about, I'm gonna set you on a tripod, I'm getting tired of holding this. So back in video 2, we talked about expectations. Expectations are important in anything in life, relationships, self-esteem, and even your project car. And today, what do I expect out of the panel gaps? Is this truck going to Barrett-Jackson? No. Does it need to look really good? Yes, absolutely. And I think there's two camps of people where it has to be perfect, every little thing about it. And there's another camp of people where they just don't care what it looks like. And I'm right in the middle. I think there's a place for having a really, really nice, good gap that might be slightly imperfect, which it doesn't. This truck's going to get driven. My buddy Mike that owns the truck, he's going to drive it. He's going to use it. This thing isn't a Trailer Queen show truck. So my expectation for today would be getting the panel gaps pretty close to a point where I know when the sheet metal goes back in after it's primed and it's getting ready to be fit up to be painted, that we can get the gaps damn good from that point. So a little body panel alignment theory for you. It's come to my attention that body panel alignment can be pretty intimidating people. So I'm going to make it a little bit easier for you. The number one rule of aligning body panel and sheet metal is make sure the frame is good and true. I haven't measured the frame on this truck, but I have no reason to believe that there's any problem with the frame. The sheet metal gaps are pretty close. If there was frame damage, they would be a little more wonky and there would be other telltale issues. I don't see any problems with the frame or anywhere where the frame's been repaired. So I'm not going to worry about that today. Number 2, always start from the fixed point. What do I mean by that? Now, on a truck cab, the entire top and the back of your cab, even down to the rocker panels, that's all fixed. We can't change that gap without cutting and welding stuff. So we want to make sure that gap looks nice and easy. Make sure that gap looks nice and even and good before we move on down the truck to this gap, because these two panels are much more mobile than cutting and welding and trimming this to make this look nice against this door. So we always make our fixed gap look good before we move forward of the truck. We're always starting from the back, moving forward. So if you have a 4-door truck or a 4-door car, you would start from the very back part of that. On a car, you'd start from the quarter panel and work your way forward and tweak those gaps moving forward. On a 4-door truck, you'd start from the rear cab corner and then work through the doors that way. Now, if you're replacing the cab corner or the quarter panel, you would want to, this is, again, another great reason why you'd want to start with aligning the body panels, because you want to make sure you have a nice gap here before you cut and weld in your new cab corner. That way you're not trying to fight the new sheet metal to fit in this corner. You're not trying to fight the door while you're getting things welded up. You want it to look nice before anything gets cut or anything comes apart. A third principle to think of when you're starting aligning sheet metal, you want to make sure your hinges and pins and bushings and things like your doors are good. Give them a pull. It's hard to do with the camera in my hand. This is really solid. Someone did the pins and bushings on this a while ago. Also, your hood hinges, you want to check those and make sure none of those aren't sloppy. I've had, actually on this exact body style truck, I've had the pins in the hinge be wobbly and weak, and that affect how the hood closes and the hood gap, and I fought that for a while before I just threw a new hinge in it, and it solved all my problems. And again, another reason why we start with the body panel alignment, I have a million reasons for it. I should probably make a tighter list of this. Maybe I'll do that before I cut this video. I like to fit the panels underweight. And what that means, and by underweight, I mean it has all the glass in the door, it has the door handles, the locks, the latches, everything in it, because that can greatly affect your sheet metal. That can greatly affect how the body panel sits in here. If you take 20, 30 pounds, I don't know how much all that stuff weighs. If you take that off, it lets the door relax a little bit and go up. So now you go reassemble your entirely freshly painted truck, you put the windows in, and now all of a sudden your gaps are a little bit weird. The door is now compensating for that weight. So I think I've talked at you plenty right now. I'd much prefer to have you see me working a lot, but I think it's important to break down these principles of this stuff, because as I said in video 2, this is where projects fail. They fail in the beginning. Failing to do these steps makes the next step that much harder. I'm going to lock you up on the tripod. I'm going to get to work adjusting this stuff. I'm gonna take the fender wells out first so I can get those out of the way so I can get to more of the body bolts. Let's get going. That's not good. The good news is, after only a little bit of fighting, I got the fender liners out. The bad news is I found a pretty hefty problem in here. I'll take you off the tripod and show you what I'm talking about. Try to get in here nice and deep. Hope this focuses. Oh, there she goes. So right here, they're supposed to be metal. That is the core support or the radiator support of the truck. That's actually a structural component, not just a sheet metal component on a vehicle like this. So now, and it looks like I can almost put my whole finger through that. It looks like they had fiberglass over it, like they knew that was there and thought that would fix it, but it does not. And also they fiberglassed the whole inside pocket of this fender. That takes a lot of time. This is a case where it costs a lot more money and takes a lot more time to do it the hard way. If they had just put a repair panel on this when they first did this truck, it would have been a lot easier, A, for me, but B, for them. I mean, to lay up fiberglass and throw a bunch of Bondo in here, that's actually a lot harder, and it can be more expensive than just welding in a repair panel. A few new problems we have to address. The radiator support, the core support, that's whatever. It unfortunately comes with the territory of doing things. And mainly that's why I wanted to get those fender liners out of there, is one, so it's a little bit easier to get in there to get to some of the bolts to adjust the sheet metal, and to see if we have any other lurking problems that we need to know about that might be affecting the sheet metal alignment, which that very well could be. That entire core support on this side is rotted where it mounts to the truck, so that could be sagging down and cause some funky panel gaps. So we might have to wait until we get the new core support to do the final sheet metal alignment. But today we're going to keep chugging along. I think we'll align the doors and the cowl panel sheet metal right there, and we'll call it good for today. So let's get to the doors. I just realized I recorded a minute or so monologue without my microphone on, so let's try this again. Just one of those days, I guess. So as you're pulling the sheet metal apart on older vehicles, you're going to find shims, like these big dogs here. These are pretty big. This came out of the fender liner, and I'm going to put a piece of tape around it and label exactly where it goes, and that'll go right in the plastic parts bin. That way, when I pull it out a couple months from now to put the fender liner back in, I know exactly where this goes. Don't lie to yourself and think you'll remember. Also, this is a really good time to keep track of little tiny parts and nuts and bolts that you're going to need on the reassembly side. Well, taking out the left-hand fender liner, I broke one of the J clips. It's a little threaded clip that goes in the fender liner. Jotted that down quickly. I'll get that on order, so that way I know all that stuff's here, and when I reassemble, I have everything I need. That's how stuff gets boogered together. It's when you're trying to throw it together in a hurry, you don't have what you need, and the next guy, it's probably going to be you that works on it, is going to be very mad at you. So it's a good time to take care of that stuff now. I'm going to go ahead and jump into adjusting the doors and getting the door gaps looking nice. We're not going to move much past that because it's not going to help us to adjust sheet metal on a core support that's sitting all wonky. It's really not going to do anything for us, but I really want to get the fixed portion of the door gaps looking nice, so that way we can move ahead and put some door skins on this truck and just keep the sheet metal work moving forward. Take two. We're going to start at the passenger door because it already has a really good fixed gap. When whoever painted the truck before and did this, they set this one up kind of okay. It's close. So the only thing we really need to address is this cowl panel gap. It's a little tight on this corner. Now you'll find something interesting here. On the fender gap, it's wide at the top, tight at the bottom. That tells us that the front of the fender is down. If that dives down, it's going to open up the top and make the bottom tight. What I say just a little bit ago, the sheet metal tells the story. So just from that gap, we already knew there was something up with the front of the fender. Now, I didn't assume that the core support was going to be routed out. I just assumed they didn't shim it when they put the truck back together, which again, shims aren't bad with a truck this old. They came from the factory, the shims. That told us a story that there was something funky with the core support, and that's why I wanted to get those fender liners out, just to make sure everything was okay under there. And what did we find? We found a big mess under there. So jumping back to the cowl panel, I'm gonna get these bolts loosened up. We'll shift this forward, and then we'll move on to the next side. That looks pretty good for a jumping off point. Again, I'm not looking for Barrett Jackson $200,000 car perfection. It's just got to look pretty good at this point. We'll worry about dialing him in nice and tight on the final sheet metal fit up before it goes off to paint. This side's got a little bit of funky stuff going on, but it really isn't that bad now that I looked at it closer. It looks like just this top hinge needs to slide back towards the back of the cab just ever so slightly to make that back body line. Let me get you off the tripod here. So what we've got, which tells me that we need to slide this top hinge back, is we have a really tight gap here on the top, almost the opposite of what happened over there. And we have a decent gap down here at the bottom. And the elevation of this body line is just ever so slightly off with this one, and the door rubs up here in this corner. So by knocking this hinge ever so slightly backward towards the back of the cab, it's going to open this gap up while lowering this panel. If that seems confusing, please hit me up in the comments. This is one of my favorite things to talk about, because when I was training people coming into the collision industry or the restoration industry, that was this is one of the things I had the most challenging time with, is aligning body panels and just understanding what moved what. And the thing you need to understand, when you move a body panel, it affects everything else. It affects it all the way around the whole truck. If we move this a 1/4 inch, it's going to affect everything around the truck. So everything's got to be aligned within sync. Though there's some funky stuff going on with this door, it's pretty close. And I can't adjust that hinge right now without taking this cowl panel off and the fender off, and I want to wait to do that until the new core support comes in. I don't like to have parts floating around the shop getting in the way where I'm moving stuff over and over again. This is close enough. I know that I can work with the gaps that we have here and get stuff lined up. I'm just going to wait to do the door skin on this side until we get the rest of the sheet metal, until we get the new core support and get the rest of the sheet metal lined up. So that concludes the sheet metal alignment. It's pretty lackluster, but we ran into issues that I didn't expect. But you know what? That's life with a project vehicle. Your entire plan changes the moment you walk in the shop sometimes, and that happened to me today. But even though it's a bummer I didn't get the sheet metal where I wanted to start ripping things apart, not a big deal, because the next time, in the next video, we are going to start tearing into this rear suspension. I leave the shop today, though. I am going to hammer all the bolts and hardware I think I'm going to be touching the next time we come in with my favorite PB blaster. That way the nuts and bolts come out pretty easy. And also now that I have the fender liners out and that front end, all the front ends open up, I'm going to hammer the bolts a few times with some PB blaster. That way when we get to lowering the front and doing all the front suspension stuff, all the hardware comes out nice and easy. So I'm going to leave you right there. I'm going to sauce up these bolts. As always, I'm Jim Murphy. This channel's You Break It, You Fix It. You can follow me in between videos on Instagram at You Break It, You Fix It. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video. This thing is damn low right now, and it looks damn cool.